Hello everyone. Today we'll learn how to create interface elements. We'll create a coin counter, a menu button, and a gate with images and text. This is what the interface we get in the end will look like. All interface elements are drawn inside the canvas object. It stretches along the screen borders. Inside the object, we place various images and indicate what they should be attached to when the screen size changes. Let's go ahead and create all the basic interface elements we need in our game. The coin counter and a couple more buttons. This is what we're going to get. There'll be the play button. We'll configure the button in such a way that when you click on it, the start menu disappears. Then, we'll need buttons that make our character thicker and higher. Let's just place them on the screen for now. We'll configure what they do later. And here's the coin counter with numbers. And an image. Then we'll create a gate. The gates are 3D objects, but they also have numbers and icons. We can use UI to create them as well. Let's go to Unity and see what interface elements we can create there. First, you need to create a new object. The UI section contains everything we'll need in this lesson. There are various images, texts, toggles, sliders, and buttons. You can try creating them all. First, let's talk about how to place interface elements on the screen. The first thing you need to create is a canvas object. Canvas is like a canvas in painting. We place all our images, buttons, and stuff inside this object. You can see that a large frame has appeared on the screen. Let's create something inside it. For example, an ordinary image. A white square appears on the screen. If we select it and press F, we'll zoom in on it. You can see it looks pretty weird. A huge object has appeared that is significantly higher than everything else we see here in the scene. Our player is somewhere over there. And here's the square. For the sake of simplicity and convenience, we don't have any additional windows in Unity. Everything is inside a single scene. 1 pixel stands for 1 meter. When we change the size of the game window, the canvas object changes. Here we can see our actual screen. As we move the object on this screen, we can see how it moves here. Right. Let's see what properties the image object has. First of all, there's Rect Transform. Let's talk about it. Ordinary 3D objects had a transform component. This one has Rect Transform. It's also responsible for positioning, but it works in a different way. You can set the image color here. Or add an image here. I'll duplicate this image as an example so that we have something interesting on the screen. I also sent you a folder with various files that we'll need for our lesson today. Let's move it to the project. Here's the folder. Just move it to Assets. Now let's drag the images to one of the image sections. You can't just drag them here. See, it says Sprite in brackets? That's the type of object that can be placed here. That means we need to configure our textures in a special way. First, I select them all. Then, we go to the import settings and choose Sprite here instead of default. Apply. This is how these textures are represented in Unity. If you want to use them in the material, the default type is fine. But UI requires Sprite. Now we can move them here. You can see that if we also change the color, it gives shade to the texture. Let's move the coin here too. But if you use any source image, the color is usually white. Now let's look at how to place these objects on the screen. Let's say we need to place a coin in the upper right corner. Here's the Rect Transform component, which is responsible for moving objects. If I enter 0 to 0 here, the coin will be located in the center of the screen. The coordinates 0 to 0 are the center of the screen. We can also change the object's width and height. Let's make the coin smaller, for example, 50 by 50 pixels. Look, if we just put it here, in the upper right corner, it seems to be fine. But if we change the screen, if you launch the game on the phone with a narrow screen, the coin will just disappear. You need to keep in mind which part of the screen the image is attached to. If we move it this way, it disappears there. Now it's attached to the center. Here is where we can choose it. Click here and select this corner. Now the coin is attached to the upper right corner, so when the screen changes, everything's fine and the coin remains in place. As a rule, if an object is in a corner, you need to attach it to that corner. Its coordinates are now calculated relative to this corner. If I enter 0, 0 here, the coin will move its center in this corner. I should also mention the pivot point. This is the scaling center of an object. If we change the coin, like this, for example, its pivot point is in the center. But we can move it. If I put 1:1 here, our object is going to change like this. Look, if our coin is attached to the corner, it's more convenient if its center is also attached to the corner. We have convenient hotkeys for this here. If you hold Shift with this window open, then, when clicking these buttons, you'll move the object's pivot point rather than the center the object is attached to. The pivot point is what the object is scaled in relation to. There is also the Alt key. It doesn't change what the object is attached to, but simply moves the object to one of the corners. Like this. It's usually very convenient to do this. You have a coin somewhere out there, you just click here, hold Shift and Alt and click in this corner. Now the coin is both attached to this corner and squared into it. Now let's adjust the size again. I think I want it a little bit smaller. Basically, this is all about positioning the object on the screen. Now, let's add some more text next to our coin here. I'll delete all these test objects. We usually have a lot of UI elements on the screen, so I recommend naming them. Like this, in parentheses. I'll call this image coin. Now let's create a new text, also UI. Choose Text Mesh Pro here. You can see there's the legacy section here which also contains text. But in the latest Unity versions, the text called Text Mesh Pro has become the standard option. So that's the one we'll use. Let's choose it. When you create this type of text for the first time, a window pops up here. Don't get scared, just press the top button there, and the text is imported to the project. I already used this text, so this window won't pop up. Our text now appears on the screen. We can write something here. Later we'll be changing the text here using a script. I'll just type 000 for now. And also fix our text in the upper right corner. I click here. Shift, Alt, and click. There are more text features. It has a size container it fits into. Here we can choose how it will be aligned, at the right, at the top, and so on. You can also choose the font size. Here. That will do. And other features, whether it's bold, for example, you can choose a font. Customize the color. These are the basic parameters, they are quite clear. When you place interface elements on the screen, always move the screen like this to make sure that nothing will disappear on a screen of a different size. Now I want to create these buttons at the bottom of the screen and the play button in the middle. These buttons will be displayed only when the game is not running. The coin counter will always be here, but these buttons appear only in the beginning. Therefore, it will be more convenient to create a separate canvas object for them. It's not a problem if you have a lot of canvases on the screen at the same time. Inside this canvas object, I create a UI button. See button, Text Mesh Pro. The button has text, so it's reflected here. Again, let's give it a name. Let's call this button Play. The button consists of two objects. First, image. Then there's also the button component. We're going to configure it so that it calls a certain function. You can set the image's color. Something like this. This will do for now. Inside, there's an ordinary text that we'll also customize. Let's write play here in capital letters. If you want to change the button size, just change its width and height. Don't scale objects up or down. If you stretch the button like this, its corners are going to distort, which looks lame. Like this. The text in it also begins to distort. This looks bad. So we use these parameters. Alternatively, you can take this rect tool here and use it to change the object. The parameters will adjust automatically. Let's make the font a little larger. At the end of the lesson, we'll configure exactly what this button should do, but first, let's place our elements. Now I'll create another button. It's like buying the character's width and height. These two buttons. Let's call it by width. Let's set it up. We don't need any text here, just this image. I want this button to be square. Like this. 100 by 100 pixels, let's say. We'll place it at the bottom. Again, remember that if you just move this button down like that while it's attached to the center, then it'll disappear. If your screen changes like this, so we need to attach it to the bottom. Hold Shift-Alt and click here. And now you can move it here. Now I'll add an icon. Like this. I also want to add the price, so to speak, how many coins it requires, and the coin image. Just create another image inside this image. It'll be much smaller, something like 20 by 20. I'm dragging the image here, clicking here, holding Shift-Alt and clicking this button. Now our image is in the lower right corner. Okay, it's too small. How about 30 by 30? I also want to add a text. Click here, UI text. And we also put it in the lower right corner. Here we should set alignment at the bottom right. And here we'll type 100. Making the character wider will cost 100 coins. Like this. We can customize the appearance of a button by nesting various objects like images or icons inside it. Alright, that's it. This button is ready. Now we can copy it and drag it here. Of course, we should remember to rename it, because this is going to be the button for buying height. Let's drag this icon into it. Right, great. You can adjust the object size a little more carefully. There's something else I want to say about Canvas and some of its parameters. You should bear this in mind. Right now our game is opened in a small window, and the interface I've just configured looks fine. But if we expand it to the full screen, the buttons become quite small. See? Like this, and if you open the game on an even smaller screen, they'll be huge. Now they are a certain number of pixels big. 100 by 100 pixels. But the screens of phones and computers may be very different. You may have a 4K or Full HD monitor, for example. Then the size of our images will be completely different. It's a problem. This is how you can solve it. There is a Canvas scaler component in the Canvas settings. Now it's in constant pixel size mode. This means a constant size in pixels. We'll choose scale with screen size. Now the objects will be scaled depending on the screen size. This means that if I increase the screen like this, the buttons change their size. You can choose a mode, width or height. Check which one works best. If you choose height mode, the object size doesn't change when you change the screen width. But if I change the height, like this, then they change. The idea is that the buttons take up a certain fixed percentage of the screen. This button now takes up about 15% of the height, and whatever we do with the screen, it will always be 15% of its height. This way, we can adapt the interface to all devices. I would also like to create a gate. It's a three-dimensional object, but there are also text and icons, so it will be convenient to use the Canvas object for them as well. First, let's create the gate object. They have these three-dimensional posts. First, I'll create an empty object, create, empty, and call it gate. Of course, we don't create it inside Canvas but rather in the scene. Then I'll place it at the coordinates 0:0:0. It'll be more convenient this way. Let's set an icon to see this object better. I'll drag it somewhere over here. The gate will be blue. Now let's create two cubes. 3D object cube. They are going to become the posts. Let's set the size. Place them like this. These are the parameters I set, quite precise. The post's height is 2, and this is the width. The position is 1.1 for the first post and -1.1 for the other one relative to its parent object. Now let's create another canvas inside the gate. UI, canvas. Usually, a canvas object stretches across the entire width of the screen and is drawn on top of the screen. But we can go here and choose World Space Mode. Then this canvas object will simply be located in the scene. I'm going to give it the coordinates 0:0:0. Now it's in the center of the gate. Let's also set an image. UI image. This image is huge now. See, this is because its size is set in meters. 1 pixel is equal to 1 meter. So if you're using this canvas object in World Space Mode, you need to scale it. I usually set the 0.01 scale. Now it looks quite fine. Now you can slightly change its size so that the canvas object fits into the gate frame perfectly. To do this, take the Rect tool and move it like this. Let's see what we want to get eventually. There'll be a strip at the top and a more transparent image here. Let's start with that. In this image. By the way, I haven't mentioned another feature. Hold Shift-Alt and click here. Then our image will stretch across the entire width of the canvas object from one edge to another and move up. I will adjust the size a little and set the blue color. Like this. Now let's copy the image and stretch it right across the entire width of the canvas. Again, hold Shift-Alt and click here. The lower image will be transparent. Alpha, and make it smaller. And the upper one is opaque. Let's name them as well because we'll have to work with the script later. The upper one will be called Image Top. And this one image, Glass. We also need text, so create a UI Text Mesh Pro inside this canvas object. Let's write some number here as a test, +50 for example. Let's make it bigger. It should be in the center, so set the alignment to the center, like this. Keep in mind that the maximum number we want to see here has 3 digits. And if this says 150, the font will be too large. You can make it smaller here. Or you can check the auto size box. Here you can play with parameters like minimum or maximum size. The idea is, the size will automatically adjust to the size of this frame. For now, let's just do this. But the standard value we'll see here is something like +50. The last thing we do is make the text bold. No, it's not the last. We also need to add icons up here. See what icons we need. The gate will make our character wider, thinner, taller, or shorter, so we need to create the arrows here. It's actually the same arrow but positioned in a different way to take up less space. So we're going to rotate one arrow in different ways now. First, I'm going to create an empty object, create, empty, inside the image, top, object, and call it expand label. The label is an icon. And expand stands for the action. This will make the character wider. Now let's create a UI image inside the expand label object and add an arrow to it. Now let's make it smaller 50, for example. By the way, this transparent glass seems to be on top of the arrow now. The order of objects is very important in the canvas object. Move the glass object up so that it is higher than the top object. Now let's move the arrow here. If you move it while holding the control button, everything moves at the same distance. Now I'll copy this arrow and turn it, again while holding the control button. This will be the icon for making the character wider. Let's copy it and call it Shrink Label. Shrink makes someone more narrow. I'll hide the expand object. Shrink is the opposite of it, so I will just turn the arrows the other way. Now we need to create 2 remaining arrows in the same way. Copy, hide. Let's call this the up label. It'll make our character taller. The down label is the same as up, only inverted. Later we'll use the script to program these objects to turn on or off, depending on what the gate does. I've created all the interface elements I need in the game. Now let's talk about how to link them to the code. There are 2 things we need to do here. First, we need this number to change. We can change the text using the code. Second, when I click on the play button, I want this menu to disappear for now. Later we'll make the character run when we click play. So, first, let's work with the coin and the numbers. We have the coin manager component where the number changes. Basically, we need to display this number here. To do this, add a link to the text to the coin manager. Type serialized field here. Then the type of the component. What is the type of this text? This component is called TextMesh Pro. So we create a field with this type of data here, TextMesh. TextMesh Pro. Choose the GUI option. You need the one with a lot of letters if you want to refer to the component in the UI. Let's just call it text. So when the coin is added, we just need to display the text on it. The text component has this field, which is also called text. So type .text equals number of coins in level. But the text is a string, and this number is an integer. This means we need to render it into a string. The toString method renders an integer into a string. That's it. Now let's make sure everything works. Go to the coin manager and add a link to the text to it. And let's collect the coins. Great. The numbers change here, and we have the number 4 here now. Cool. Now let's see how to link events to the button click. I'll create a new script I'll call Game Manager. This is a very important script. It'll be responsible for the main events that occur in the game. For example, now I want the game to start when I click play. Later it'll also manage moving between levels and winning or losing the game. Basically, this script is responsible for the main events in the game. It has this gear icon here. Don't let it bother you. Unity has this feature that if an object is called Game Manager, it has a gear icon. Now let's create a new method in it. Public void. I'll call it play, like the button. Now we'll make it hide the start menu, so that the menu disappears when we click play. To make it disappear, we need a link to it. Create a field with the game object type. I'll call it Start menu. This method will simply turn off this object. Start menu.set active false. Later we'll program the character so that it can't move in the beginning, but starts moving when play is called. For now, I just wanted to show how to link method calls to buttons. We have a button that has the button component, and we have this part here, which is an event. On click the plus sign and drag what we need here. Oh yes, we need to assign the game manager to an object in the scene. I'll create an empty object, call it game manager, and drag the script to it. Now it needs a link to the start menu. It's this whole canvas. Now let's link the play button. Drag the object here, and select the script linked to this object and the method that we want to call. It's play. Like this. Now when I click the button, the method is called in the game manager, which hides the window. Let's give this canvas object a name. Let's say Start Menu. You can see we have a lot of objects, buttons, and icons in the canvas object, so if you don't give them names, it's easy to get confused. Please note the method we call using the button must be public, otherwise it'll be unavailable for selection. When developing an interface, the most important thing is to test how it will look on different screens with different resolutions. Always think about what device your game will run on.